Chapter 151. Klein's request. Almond's cry accompanied by insects echoed in the abandoned castle on the way to the town. Ask visual ahead, silent for a few seconds. Although I am not completely sure, I already have some ideas. Maybe I am a person who has lived for a long time. Mr. Ask. In fact, you can really consider whether you are still in the category of people. Klein replied in his heart, but didn't dare to say, this wilderness, this dead of night, always makes people weak. I should have paid some price to get a long life. I have lived from the end of the quaternary to the present, just like a ghost wandering around the mainland. Ask had a deep voice, as if to suppress his inner emotions. I don't remember the past, and I forgot the people and things that I vowed to remember. Klein thoughtfully with a cane to dial the weeds in front of the way. Mr. Ask, I have a guess about your situation. What guess? Ask glanced at his fellow travelers. I think your forgetfulness is cyclical. Maybe you will die every few decades, empty your previous memories, and then wake up from a dark sleep after a certain period of time and start a new life. Only in this way can you explain your different dreams, which is what happened in your different lives. Klein described his own speculation. Az's footsteps ran slow down. Seems to be the darkness pulls the skirts, his eyes deep and remote to looking at the front, for a long time only way. This is consistent with some memories that I woke up after being stimulated just now. Stimulated by just now woke up some memories? Klein heart movement, blurred out away. Mr. Ask, maybe you don't need to leave Tingen to pursue the lost past. You will remember it slowly. Why? Ask surprised his head. Klein a slight laughed. Your memory has not been completely lost. The part that was stimulated to wake up today is proof. Besides, do you remember when you woke up in Backlander and found yourself forgetting the past? Ask nodded solemnly. This is a nightmare that has been bothering me. Klein ordered the silver inlaid black cane, specifically explained. Before today, I didn't think there was anything wrong with this matter, but combined with your description just now and my own guess, it seemed a little strange. When you woke up from a dream, you had a new identity certificate and enough money, and the way you appeared without scaring others. All this was just like an arrangement, which made you integrate into society quickly. Then who arranged it? There is only one answer. You in the past. In the past, you recovered your memory and knew that you were about to usher in a new life. So you arranged everything after that and tried to avoid being suspected. Ask stopped and looked at the dim light in the distant town, and once again fell into a long silence. Maybe the parents I've been looking for are the old me. He sighed aloud and admitted that Klein's reasoning was convincing in disguise. So, you don't have to do anything, just wait patiently, and you will slowly recover your memory. Klein gave a conclusion and comforted the other party. Ask unconsciously waved his cane, and then the whole person seemed to be transformed into a marble statue. After a long time, his eyes profoundly replied, Maybe when the old life comes to an end, I will completely restore my memory. I don't want to wait that long. I want to have plenty of time to figure out and get rid of this fate. Therefore, I must actively look for the past, stimulate myself bit by bit, and complete the awakening in your speculation ahead of time. Waiting will only make me repeat the previous cycle. This is indeed the most anticipated choice. Klein didn't persuade the other party, but said, Mr. Ask, besides helping each other find the criminals who made my fate uncoordinated and took your child's skull, can I ask you a favor, a trivial favor? Azg gently a moment to say, What do you need me to do? Klein organized the language and said, I hope you'll arrive in the small town around Tingen next week, or next week. It is better to arrive in the small town by carriage for more than 2 hours and less than 5 hours, and create some paranormal that won't hurt people. Well, I think you should be very good at something in the field of necromancer according to the way you traced criminals by blood ties just now. No problem. Ask agreed without hesitation and never asked the other party why he did that. At the same time, he also acquiesced in Klein's guess about his ability. Thank you. This matter is very important to me. Well, when you choose the target of paranormal, you can only choose the believers of the goddess of the night, and don't leave any clues. Klein told one that only in this way, The incident will be transferred to the night watchman's team of Ting-Gen Market Value. Only in this way can he join the task team and propose to use the seal 3-0782. Only in this way can he steal the seal, that is, the blood power in the mutated sun emblem, and create a Yang Yen spell. This is the most powerful thing he can get at present. Klein must make every effort to become strong under the premise that the behind-the-scenes man living in the red chimney house has not left Ting-Gen, and he is constantly checking himself. Well, according to the knowledge I have gained, just stealing a little power won't cause damage to 3-0782. At most it will shorten the service life of its purification effect. I do this for the peace and stability of Ting-Gen. Klein defended himself in his mind. AZ Grams don't care about each other's purpose, still nods. I will tell you the name and approximate time of the town in advance, so that you can get ready. Call. Klein suddenly relieved. Feel Ram Town is not white. Well, although only the outermost veil of Mr. Ask's mystery has been uncovered, there are still more unknowns and unsolved, but at least he has gained his friendship and found a reliable ally in dealing with the people behind the scenes. At 11:30 at night, Klein returned to number 2 Daffodil Street, tired, sleepy, and hungry. Mr. Ask didn't invite me to dinner. Well, he's in no mood to eat. Klein muttered silently, took out his key, and opened the door. The house is not as dark as he expected. An elegant gas lamp quietly blooms, making the living room warm and bright, and Benson, who is sitting alone on the sofa, is covered with a bright coat. Seeing the gate open, Benson was about to open his mouth with a book. Suddenly he yawned and had to stretch out his hand to cover his mouth. Klein shut the door, looks like casually smiled and said, I went to the town of Ramd with Ask, where there is an abandoned castle with a long history. Benson suddenly smiled to say with smile, a moonless night, 1,000-year-old castle abandoned, a cold and gloomy environment, and an archaeological team with only 2 people. This is the standard spiritual beginning. What happened tonight is really paranormal. Klein thought of the strange door created by Mr. Ask, thought of the frequent baby crying, and said with a little terror, in that environment, there is indeed this feeling. Benson yawned again, so he closed the book and said, I have to go to bed. Since I started studying grammar and reading classical literature, my sleep quality has become very good. Klein did Sarah laugh, suddenly remind of Miss Justice mentioned things so low-voice way. Benson, you know, our company has a certain relationship with the Wa County Police Department in Joniaho. Recently, I heard that there was a rumor from Backlander that the king, prime minister, ministers, and parliamentarians were tired of procrastinating and inefficient government, and they plan to carry out reforms and select talents by means of public examinations, just like the college entrance examination. Benson, first vacant, then eyes bright, asks, the method of public examination? Yes, as long as you can pass the exam, you can also be an employee of the government to deal with specific affairs. I guess the setting of the exam content will follow the college entrance examination, grammar, classical literature, certain mathematical and logical abilities, and basic legal knowledge. Klein took the opportunity to instill his own ideas. Finally, Benson, this matter must be kept secret and you should not hold out too much hope for anyone. I'll remember that. I know I just need to study hard. Benson smiled and took us back. With or without this matter, I will study hard and try to get rid of the current situation and find a better job as soon as possible. Learning is the biggest difference between people and curly-haired baboons. No, scientific research shows that baboons have a high IQ and a certain learning ability. Klein silently vomited and watched Benson go to the second floor. Then, he smiled and touched his flat stomach and stepped close to the kitchen, finding out the leftovers and some chicken specially left by Melissa. Klein was completely relaxed and prepared dinner. At this time, all is silent outside. The night is thick, most people have fallen asleep, and only he is breathing the cool air with mixed fragrance nearby. Making a little noise, everything is so peaceful and carefree. After eating and drinking enough, washing the dishes and soaking himself, Klein went back to the bedroom and locked the wooden door. He yawned, pulled himself together, pulled out the silver dagger for the ceremony, and sealed the whole room with a spiritual wall. He's going to the fog to predict whether it's dangerous to summon fools who don't belong to this era. Chapter 152. A good attempt. The gray and hazy fog permeates forever, and the dark red illusory stars hang far or near. Klein sits in the grand palace like a giant's residence and quietly looks at everything familiar. After a few seconds, he looked back, let a tan parchment emerge in front of him, and then began to write down the summoning ceremony of his altered mantra. Light a candle to symbolize yourself. Create a holy environment with the spiritual wall. Drop the full moon essential oil, chamomile pure dew, deep sleep flower powder, and other materials into the candlelight. Note: in this step, you don't need to pay too much attention because you are summoning yourself. Recite the following mantras. Ancient Hermes, giant language, dragon language, elf language. You must shout low. I call in my name, Hermes, a fool who does not belong to this era, a mysterious master above the fog, and a yellow and black king in charge of good luck. After careful examination for 3 times, Klein wrote the divination sentence at the bottom. It is dangerous to carry out the above ceremony outside. Phew! He took a breath, put away his pen, untied the silver chain in his cuff, and held it with his left hand. When the topaz pendant was quietly suspended above the parchment, he almost touched the divination sentence, and he restrained his mind and entered a state of meditation. It is dangerous to carry out the above ceremony outside. It is dangerous to carry out the above ceremony outside. After 7 times of meditation, Klein opened his almost black eyes and saw the topaz pendant turning counterclockwise. This means no. It means there is no danger. You can try it. Klein is busy making the objects in front of him disappear, extending spirituality to wrap himself, and simulating the feeling of falling down sharply. After returning to the bedroom, Klein cleaned the desk and put a mint-flavored candle in the center because he had sealed the whole room with the spiritual wall. He pressed his right hand on the candle wick and lit the other side with spiritual friction. In the flickering yellow light, Klein dripped the corresponding essential oil, pure dew, and herbal powder into the flame. The quiet and carefree fragrance permeates instantly, and the room is sometimes bright and sometimes dim. Take a step back. Klein looked at the candle that symbolizes himself and shouted in a giant language. Me. Then, he switched to Hermes. I call in my name. A fool who does not belong to this era, a mysterious master above the fog, and a yellow and black king in charge of good luck. As soon as his voice fell, he felt the flickering dim candlelight mixed with a quiet fragrance around him into a whirlpool, madly absorbing his own spirituality. It belongs to the deep sleeping flower of the red crescent. Please pass the power to my mantra. Klein endured the affliction of being deprived of spirituality and finished reciting the subsequent mantra. At this time, he saw the candlelight stop shaking, standing there quietly and stained with gray color, stretching around to the size of a palm. I didn't summon anything. Oh, yes. Maybe I need to respond to the fog. It's really troublesome to summon myself. Klein pinched his empty and stinging forehead and silently said to himself. He slowed down for more than 10 seconds, took 4 steps backwards, came to the fog again, and saw circles of light lines swinging on the top of the ancient long table. This comes from the strange symbol behind the high-backed chair, the strange symbol composed of the part, the pupil-free eye, symbolizing secrecy, and the part, the twisted line, symbolizing change. Klein just made a gesture of reaching out and touching, and immediately there was me. In my name, I called for mantras such as fools who don't belong to this era and mysterious masters above the fog, and saw the coming spirituality mixed with the swaying light lines and turned into an illusory and unformed door. The door wobbled and wanted to open, and Klein was immediately inspired and gave a strong idea to push it open. Almost instantly, the boundless fog and the magnificent palace were suddenly pulled, resulting in invisible ripples. This ripple goes round and round, rushing to the illusory and unformed door. However, no matter how Klein pushed, the door could not be opened, and all the movements finally fell silent, because the call gate is not fully formed. Klein withdrew his mind and analyzed the cause of failure with a slight frown. He casually named the illusory door the door of calling. Well, It's my lack of spirituality that I can't build a complete calling door. When I am promoted to Sequence 8 and become a clown, I can try again after the initial dangerous stage, and maybe there will be no problem at that time." Klein nodded gently and probably understood what was going on. This experiment gave him great confidence and strong encouragement, because it was the first time that he made a different reaction to the mysterious space above the gray fog besides the event of divining the eternal sun. "One day, I will find out all the secrets here," Klein announced excitedly in his heart, and fell into the boundless fog under the spiritual package. Back to the bedroom, Klein quickly put out the candles, ended the ceremony, and then packed his desk and lifted the spiritual wall. In the suddenly blowing wind, he yawned and fell into bed. As soon as he wrapped the quilt, he fell asleep. In a misty and fragmented dream, Klein suddenly woke up and found himself sitting in the living room at home, holding a copy of the Honest newspaper of Tianjin City. Captain won't come again? First he was stupefied, and then he looked out the window with anger and funny. With a creak, the door opened, and Dunn, wearing a black over-the-knee trench coat, came in slowly with a cane and a pipe. He still wears a half-height black hat and still has quiet gray eyes. Dunn came to the living room, sat on the single-person sofa, and laid his right leg leisurely on his left leg. He put away his cane, took off his hat, leaned back, and looked at Klein quietly as if thinking Captain would do. "You want to do today?" Klein was at a loss. In order not to reveal that he knew it was a dream, he pretended not to be affected and continued reading the newspaper. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. He looked up at Dunn across the eye and found that the captain was still looking at himself quietly, as if thinking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Klein tossed and turned the newspaper several times, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw Dunn looking at himself quietly, as if thinking, "Captain, I'm uncomfortable like this. Klein can't sit still." He folded the newspaper, put it aside, nodded at Dunn with a smile, then went to the kitchen and took out a rag, pretending to wipe the dining table and coffee table. "Captain, you see, my dream is so simple, so ordinary and so boring, and there is nothing to observe. Please go. Why don't you become a ghost, and I'll pretend to be frightened and let you accomplish your nightmare." He prayed silently, but looked up and saw Dunn's dark gray eyes that seemed to be thinking. Under such a silent and constant gaze, Klein cleaned the furniture and cleaned the room and was exhausted in his dream. What bothers him most is Dunn Smith, who has been looking at himself quietly as if thinking. I don't know how long he was busy, but he finally saw the captain put down his right leg, stood up, took his cane, put on his hat, and walked to the gate. Klein held her breath and watched Dunn leave home all the way. He couldn't help raising his right hand and making a goodbye gesture. "Call. Wait until everything is back to normal." Klein long spit out a sigh. What a nightmare just now. He wanted to cry without tears. Philip Department Store, West Side, Backlanda. This is the most upscale department store in the Kingdom of Ruan, which is only open to aristocrats and rich people with membership. There are always luxury carriages parked outside it, with different badges. Besides being a holy place for shopping, it has become a well-known social place because of the strict restrictions on personnel. Audrey, with the maid and the golden retriever Susie, got out of the carriage and entered the gate with the waiter's hospitality. Along the way, from time to time, she can see the Viscount, the Countess, or a girl with prominent parent. She maintains an elegant posture, greets one by one with standard but not stiff manners, and briefly communicates with different nobles through different entry points. For example, in the face of Countess, she has to praise how well her new dress fits and greet Baroness, which means how outstanding her husband is in the upper house. In the past, Audrey always didn't do well in this link, and she was too headstrong and self-centered. But now, she can cope perfectly without even paying more attention. In the eyes of the audience, the emotions and thoughts of most aristocratic women are written on their faces. Arriving at the second floor, Audrey turned to the clothing store. The waiter in the shop is a young and short girl. She wears a black and white dress and has stubborn shoulder-length blonde hair. She is Hugh Dilcha, the arbitrator. Audrey winked at Susie, the big dog, without any change of expression. The other party instantly understood her meaning and ran happily to another counter, and the maid had to follow quickly and try to pull Susie back. Well done. Audrey secretly praised, went to Hugh Dilcha and pretended to be watching different styles of dresses. What do you want to meet me here? Hugh introduced loudly and asked in a low voice. Her voice is very immature, just like a child. What about the original waiter? Audrey didn't answer the rhetorical question. Hugh looked around and said, I convinced her that she was happy to have a rest all morning. Audrey looked at different styles of dresses, took out a folded piece of paper from the suede handbag she was carrying, and handed it to Hugh covertly. Lieutenant General Chi Lin Gus sneaked into Backlander secretly. This is his portrait. I hope you can help me find him. Well, don't disturb him. Hugh took the paper, took a quick look, and found that it was a vivid sketch, a man in his 30s with a unique wide chin. I am often praised by my teacher in painting. Audrey glanced at her eyes and raised her head slightly. She added, the amount of reward for the kingdom's alignment with rings is 10,000 pounds. If you can really catch him, even if it is only a person who provides clues, you will definitely get at least a few £100. As soon as her voice fell, she unexpectedly saw Hugh's eyes light up. Genius remembers the address of this website for 1 second. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 153 The final betting unique wide chin. Ancient knight's bun. Cold, smiling eyes. Hugh Dilcha was half lying on the sofa, studying the sketch given by Audrey carefully. In her eyes, this is a living, walking golden pound. After the appearance of Chi Lin Gus, the great pirate, entered her mind deeply, she read an additional description. Brown hair, dark green eyes. Portraits are only for reference, because the target has the ability to transform into others and the duration is unknown. Portraits are only for reference. Goals can be transformed into others. Only for reference, transforming others. Then why should I remember the sketch content so carefully? Hugh's expression is dull, and he seems to feel the malice of the world. She looked up in confusion, looked across the sofa, and said to herself, there is no way to find it at all. I don't know what it looks like. I only know that it is a foreigner. The number of newcomers to Backlander every day is simply impossible to count. Fourth tried hard to sit up, but failed 3 times. I'm just an apprentice, not an arbitrator. She muttered, reaching out and holding the back of the sofa, and successfully changed from lying to sitting. That lady may think we are prophets? Falls made a joke. Hugh was about to answer when he suddenly found that there were many additional descriptions. She read it out in a low voice. Suggestions from the following ways to find. 1. Chi Lin Gus has an evil object on him, which will devour the flesh and soul of a living person every other day, considering the missing tramp. 2. Collect the information of Chi Lin Gus in detail and sum up his unique hobbies and behavior patterns. 3. A person's 5 senses may be changed, but as long as he has not undergone special training, he will always behave like himself, such as his favorite food, walking style, habitual movements, and more details. Buddha's thought heard slightly and said, Miss Audrey is not a naive girl as rumored. She has a delicate heart and calm observation. Really? Hugh asked a question without being sure, but instead of expecting an answer, he suggested, I'm in charge of collecting information, and you summarize the pile of gold pounds. No, the hobby and characteristics of the pirate general. 4. Zheng Big Eyes, shaking his cigarette tin box way. How do you have the heart to? How can you have the heart to let a slender and sensitive writer do this kind of inductive summary, analysis, and reasoning? Hugh caught a glimpse of his friend, unconsciously showing convincing majesty. There is a very wonderful reasoning content in your Storm Villa. Buddha, Sua shoulder, lower the head looking at the tea table. Do you know how many hairs I lost and how many times I lost sleep for that reasoning? She looked up quickly, glanced at Hugh Dear, then continued to bury her head and muttered, Life is very short and there are too many things to do. Why should we waste it on such boring and tedious work? Very reasonable. Hugh almost nodded and managed to maintain the majesty of the arbitrator. Then, do you have any other way to solve this problem? She held her voice down to make her immature voice low. Buddha's thought seriously for more than 10 seconds, suddenly looked up and said, We can ask professionals to do it. After you have collected the information of Lieutenant General Hurricane, we will erase the name and take it to an excellent detective, asking him to help summarize and deduce, which only requires consulting fees. Why didn't I think? Hugh's mind went blank, and Fowles looked at me, and I looked at you, and no one spoke. When the atmosphere became awkward, she cleared her throat and said, "Just do as you suggest." "Say that finish," she busy added. "The consulting fee is up to you." House Block, Divination Club. Good afternoon, Mr. Moridi. Angelica, a beautiful lady in charge of hospitality, looked at the front with surprise. "You seldom come here on Friday." In order to screen the Red Chimney House, Klein smiled and said, "Fate will not repeat itself all the time, but will always bring us some surprises." He happened to pass by here, and it was time to hire a carriage, so he came up to have a drink of black tea and have a rest. In addition, this is the last time for him to pave the way. With the new experience of Divination Club, he will logically make a special application to Dunsmith. Your words are always full of philosophy. Angelica sincerely praised. Klein wanted to think, consider the said, "I may seldom come to the club in the future, so you don't need to recommend me to others." After the potions have been digested, he is to move on to a new goal. Why? Angelica said in surprise and confusion, "You are already very famous in the club. Most people know that your divination is very accurate and magical. We are even considering asking you to be a lecture teacher on Sunday. If there is £1 for divination every time, I will grind my teeth no matter how tired and bitter I am. And I have to run more houses with red chimneys to find out who is behind it as soon as possible." Klein gently laughed. "Lady, don't stay. It's fate. It's not that I will never come to the club again. I just reduced the frequency, and my membership fee will be paid as scheduled. Anyway, I can submit an expense account. I will come and monitor here occasionally." Klein added silently, "It's a pity. I hope you can just come to the club when I'm confused." Angelica sighed. After the initial surprise, she found that she was not as surprised as she thought. Perhaps such a magical and fate-fearing soothsayer is really not something that a club in Tingen can have for a long time. Angelica seems to be thinking and laughs. "Shiba black tea?" "Yes." Klein smiled back. He sat in the club for more than 10 minutes, took a break, drank the black tea, left here, and took a rail bus back to Daffodil Street. When he entered the door, he habitually opened the mailbox and saw a letter that had just been delivered. With open, Klein found this letter from Mr. Ask. "I will go to Morristown on Sunday and return on Wednesday." The townspeople in Morristown generally believe in the goddess. They go on Sunday, so according to normal efficiency, the night watchman can only receive the news on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I can just catch up. Mr. Askey actually remembered my request. I hope he can also remember not to come forward in person, just summon a ghost and bluff. Klein nodded invisibly, gushed out his own spirituality, and lit the letter paper by friction. With a flick of his hand, the flame turned to dust and slowly fell to the ground. On Saturday morning, Klein wore a thin black trench coat, a half-height silk hat, and a silver-inlaid walking stick, and leisurely walked into the Blackthorn Security Company. After greeting Luo Shan, he looked at the partition position and saw the door of the captain's office open, so he deliberately said without controlling the volume, "Last night, at the Divination Club, I saw a girl who is very similar to you." "Really?" Luo Shan asked with interest. Klein nodded insincerely and replied, "Really, I even thought she was your sister. It's a pity that I have no sisters, not even cousins." Luo Shan laughed and said, "Do you remember her name?" "No. Why should I remember her name?" Klein chuckled. "Seeing you is no different from seeing her." "Can I take it that you are praising me?" Luo Shan always don't need others to find a topic. Take the initiative to ask, "Klein, you must have made a lot of money in the Divination Club? As a true soothsayer, your level is not comparable to that of other amateurs. Don't mention this topic, we are still good colleagues." Klein coughed a track. "Diviners have to fear fate and cannot use divination to seek abnormal interests. Are you summing up your prophecies?" Luo Shan asked curiously. "Yes." Klein answered frankly. After chatting with each other for a few more words, he waved goodbye, took his hat, and walked to the partition to knock, 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 knock at the open door. Please come in. Dunn looked up and saw his one eye, busy correcting his posture. Klein has sounded out the captain's tone in the past 2 days, making sure that Dunsmith didn't mention a word to others while trying to play, which was obviously taboo to the church's top management. So, he shut the door behind him and sat opposite, with a solemn expression and a little excitement. Captain, I feel that I have completely mastered the soothsayer potion. I want to submit a special application. Chapter 154 Sharing Experience. Look into Klein's eyes. Dunn took a deep breath, leaned back, and slowly spit out. Are you sure? His expression has changed little, and he seems to be ready for the special application, but he didn't expect it to come so soon. Captain, how do you feel? Relieved and steadfast in your heart? Klein didn't hide his smile. I'm sure, Captain, when you master the potion thoroughly, you will have a special and wonderful feeling, and you will undoubtedly be sure that you have mastered the potion thoroughly. Special, wonderful feeling. Dunn chewed this sentence in a low voice, and his brow wrinkled slowly. Hey, the captain's previous 2 promotions were all carried out under the condition of not fully digesting the potion. Also, if you don't know how to play, it's hard to digest thoroughly. You can only reduce the risk of losing control by polishing for a long time and subconsciously playing. Poor Captain. Klein looked at Dunsmith quietly, without opening his mouth or adding anything, and let the other side think carefully. After nearly a minute, Dunn's quiet gray eyes once again reflected Klein's figure, and he considered the language. Maybe waiting for another year is a better choice. What the captain means is that if we wait for another year, we won't be too conspicuous. Under the premise of Ms. Daly as an example, the top management won't pay too much attention to me, and at most we will be included in the list for further observation. Klein wanted to think, calmly replied. I originally wanted to wait until next year to file a special application. After all, there are still many things I need to master. For example, fighting is just getting started. But, Captain, don't you think we have encountered too many coincidences in this month or two? Pursuing the kidnapper, I met the notes of the Antigonus family in the opposite room. The delivery of the seal 2-049 was delayed, and as a result, Riel Bieber did not escape from Tingen, but began to try to digest his strength at the dock. I went to a birthday party, which led to the story of Heiners Vincent. I went to the library to investigate and met the members of the Aurora Society on the spot. I don't know what these coincidences mean, but I always feel uneasy, so I want to improve myself to the greatest extent. Seize this opportunity, Klein ordered the things behind the scenes, which is what he had to put into the schedule, reminding the night watchman team to find more clues from other aspects without exposing his own special circumstances. And those words he just said can only draw a conclusion in the eyes of others, with keen intuition and good at combing. After Klein said the word, but Dunn's body gradually leaned forward, and in the end, he put his crossed hands against his mouth. His eyes were. He added helplessly in his mind, Do you like something mature? Melissa frowned slightly. Then you must solve the marriage problem as soon as possible.
Huh?
Klein is really hard to understand the idea of sister jumping, blankly asks, Why? Melissa explained very seriously, When you save enough money for your future marriage, you will be almost in your mid-20s. At that age, girls who are a little more mature than you are either married or engaged long ago. Do you want to pursue a widow? What's all this with what? Klein replied in Chinese with a dull face in his mind. Benson smiled and refuted his sister. Melissa, you don't understand. In today's middle class, it is not uncommon for women who are not married or engaged at the age of 30. They are mainly believers in the goddess, and most of them have the ability to make a good life for themselves. They would rather be single than accept and dissatisfied marriage. Well, I read it in Family Magazine. Really? Melissa, after all, is only a 16-year-old girl and doesn't know much about similar things to see brother and sister more chat more interested. Klein cough a track. When I say mature, I mean mental state. I don't have to be older than me, and it is Benson who should be more worried about marriage. I'm sorry, brother. I had to. He silently apologized in his heart. Melissa paused, then nodded heavily. Yes. Originally wanted to specifically talk about the marriage of the middle class, Benson suddenly shuddered, looking at his sister's way. I am at a turning point in my life, and I must devote all my energy to my study. When I have a satisfactory job and a certain amount of savings, I will have the confidence to pursue my favorite lady and give her a good life. Klein and Melissa Firstjung immediately blurted out at the same time. Do you have a favorite lady? Just casually perfunctory, Benson suddenly got a fright and hurriedly shook his head. No. I'm just giving an example. Backlander, Hillston District, in a slightly gloomy house, in front of the unlit fireplace, a middle-aged and old man with gray temples sat in a rocking chair with a dark pipe and looked at the visitors in the sofa area deeply. He is the owner here, Isinger Stanton, a very famous private detective in the small circle, but he didn't set up a firm, just asked an assistant for help. Isinger, dressed in a white shirt and black vest, put his pipe to his mouth, took a drag on it intoxicated, and slowly spat out. The consultation fee for half an hour is £1. If I were you, I wouldn't waste a second. The two ladies in the sofa area are Voss Wall and Hugh Dilcher. They have collected the information of Lieutenant General Hurricane Chi Lin Gus and intend to ask a detective who is good at deduction to help sum up the behavior law of the target. Of course, they left out the name of Chi Lin Gus and changed the description of the extraordinary content. Looking at Isinger, whose face is emaciated, angular, and his blue eyes are shallow, Hugh Dilcher handed the file bag in his hand to the other assistant, a young man with brown hair who wears gold-rimmed glasses and is capable of temperament. Detective, I hope you can find out the behavior pattern of the target in Backlander from the data. Although he is not tall, when Hugh Dilcher sits up straight and speaks with a heavy voice, the majesty still makes people want to obey involuntarily. Isinger gave her a deep look, took the envelope from the assistant, untied it, and pulled out the information inside. He put down his pipe and concentrated on reading one by one, without missing anything. 10 minutes later, the gray-haired gentleman tapped on the handrail slowly. The target has a paranoid love for the wind. Then, in Backlander, the capital of dust, he will definitely not choose a heavily polluted area to live for a long time. That is to say, he may live in Queens, West District, Hillston District, Jowood District, or the suburbs of North District. The goal is a serial killer with mental illness. Every other day, he will murder a living person. The reasonable approach is to target those homeless tramps. In Backlander, even the police don't know how many tramps there are. The area where the target lives will not be too close or too far away from the East District and Backlander Bridge, where there are many tramps. It is immature to look for victims around frequently, which is inconsistent with your description. And if it takes a long time to find the object you want to murder, the target may be unable to control his desire and commit crimes under easy exposure. The target is a senior sailor who has outstanding ability to move in the water. A reasonable inference is that the place where he lives will not be too far away from the river, and once he encounters an accident, it will be the best choice for him to escape safely. To sum up, we can outline the scope of the target's activities. He lives not far from the Backlander Bridge area, considering the west side and the Tassoc River in Jowood District. The information you gave can only infer these contents. Although I didn't quite understand it, it seemed reasonable. Hugh and Forsey looked at each other, nodded solemnly, withdrew the information, and got up to leave. Looking at the back of the assistant who sent the two ladies out, Isinger, whose temples were gray, took out a brass ornament from his waistcoat pocket. It was a pocket-sized open book with an upright eye in the middle. Isinger sway rocking chair, stroking ornaments, while whispering to himself. Chi Lin Gus sneaked into Backlander? Port Pulitzer, in some basement, Alger, an upside-down man, sat in a chair and looked coldly at the man who was squirming and struggling in front of him. The man dressed as a sailor, his head was completely wrapped in a light blue water film, and his face was purple. His hands kept scratching at his face, but only a drop of liquid could be thrown out. Finally, he couldn't bear it and gave the signal of surrender. Alger corners of the mouth, casually took the palm, the light blue water. Film immediately disintegrated into raindrops and fell to the ground. The man dressed as a sailor gasped until he coughed so hard that he tore his heart and shattered his lungs. Wait for each other to calm down. Alger leaned back and imitated the calm and cool tone of fools. Tell me, the purpose of Qilin Gus going to Backlander? He is to complete a commission, but I don't know exactly what it is. The pirate completely lost the will to resist and answered honestly and frankly. I only know the benefits he may get. Qilin Gus once proudly mentioned in front of us that if this thing goes well, he will get an item he has dreamed of for a long time, and the 4 kings and pirates will also become 5 kings. Something you've dreamed of for a long time? Alger frowned, lost in thought. On Monday morning, Klein still couldn't rest and continued to check the houses with red chimneys in Tingen as planned. Unfortunately, this time, he still failed to find the target. He came home at noon, heated last night's leftovers, chewed a loaf of oatmeal bread, and then slept for an hour. By 2:40, Klein put down his books, sealed the bedroom with spirituality, and once again entered the mysterious space above the fog. He casually sat down on the bronze long table, ignoring the frequency of the sun heartbeat, held out his right hand and gave a response in advance that within the city of Silver, Dirk Berg was sweating on the training ground, and suddenly he was in a trance. He saw the heavy fog and the fool sitting in the high-backed chair in the depths of the fog. He was intrigued, then stopped moving and lowered his head. When the illusion disappeared, he silently counted his heartbeat, took a silver-white straight sword, and quickly walked to the rest area. After 1,000 heartbeats, he has locked himself in a separate bathroom. After waiting for more than a dozen breaths, he saw the crimson light coming from the void and drowned himself. Above the fog, Klein leaned back and tapped his left tooth twice, quietly opening the second sight. He saw the depths of the etheric body of the sun, and the mottled color became pure, like the morning light. So he smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Singer." At the same time, he also found that the bright stars behind his high-backed chair moved rapidly and reorganized into symbols, symbolizing the sun. Without my mind, it naturally changed, just like a conditioned reflex. Well, except for the palace, the long table and the chair, other things that have come out can't be preserved after I leave here. They are very special. There are so many secrets above this fog. Klein looked at everything in front of him thoughtfully. Dirk bowed his head again, restrained, and humbly replied, "It all comes from your help, and this is just the beginning." He is not surprised that a fool can see that he has taken a magic potion. At this moment, Klein took out a silver pocket watch, took one look at it, and smiled gently. "Then let's start the party. Remember, after that, it will be about this frequency, well, or interval." While speaking, he established contact with the crimson star symbolizing justice and hanging upside down, and pulled the 2 members back into the grand palace like a giant's residence. Audrey, just see the scene in front of you, immediately with a brisk tone dozen hello. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. I have another page of Rossel's diary here." "Good afternoon, Mr. Sun. Did you get the formula of Mind Reader? P.S. Ask for recommended tickets and monthly tickets on Monday. Chapter 158. Be prepared. The first more recommended votes monthly ticket, Miss Justice, can always keep a happy mood, which is really enviable. I hope I can do the same." Hearing the brisk greeting, Klein, who sits at the head of the bronze long table, could not help but sigh with emotion silently. But he immediately thought that the other parties simply took out £1,000 in cash, and suddenly felt that it was very difficult for him to always keep a happy mood like Miss Justice. Dirk Berg, the son, is a teenager who cares about his reputation very much and immediately replied, "I have obtained the formula of Mind Reader." During this time, he sorted out the legacy left by his parents. Except for the house, furniture, and a few items for missing, all the other valuable things were taken to the black market in the Silver City in exchange for the recipe of Mind Reader and the materials of Singer potions. At present, he only lives on a fixed amount of food. However, he believes that this situation will not last long. After passing the combat assessment, he will join the team to clean up the surrounding dark things and receive a lot of rewards. That when I am really strong, I will apply to be a member of the elite team, explore the depths of darkness, and find a way to lift the curse. Dirk thought hopefully while looking sideways at the fool in the thick fog. Last time, he noticed that Miss Justice, after asking Mr. Fool, could strangely make the unknown Roselle diary appear directly. Although Dirk didn't understand what was going on, he thought it would be better to take a look at Mr. Fool. Do you remember the formula in your head first? Then pick up the pen at hand and give a strong desire to express it. Klein leaned back slowly in the chair. Because the sun comes from the Silver City, which is suspected to be a land abandoned by God, it is not a pen but a quill pen that he shows in front of the other party, but of course, there is still knowing. Dyrek did not dare to doubt the words of fools, and immediately grasped the quill pen that suddenly appeared at hand. A few seconds later, he did as he was told, and he didn't accidentally see the formula of the Mind Reader potion on the tan parchment in front of him. After reviewing it twice, Dyrek kept silent and pushed the promised things to Miss Justice. Audrey was excited and looking forward to it, but she took it very portentously. Her eyes swept away, and all the words translated by Klein came to mind. Main materials: the complete pituitary gland of phantom yalong and 10 milliliters of spinal fluid of semi-phantom rabbit. Auxiliary materials: I haven't heard of the main materials. Well, I don't know enough. Audrey, who has been catching up with the types and names of common and extraordinary materials from Fowles and Hugh recently, thinks with a little chagrin by this time she had forgotten what an audience was. Suddenly, Audrey heard a slight knock and looked at the top of the bronze long table subconsciously. She was surprised to see Mr. Fool tapping the edge of the table with the index finger of his right hand, and gently nodded to himself and made a sign. What happened? Audrey was puzzled and her eyes were blank. She was about to ask questions when, out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw that the formula of Mind Reader in front of her had changed, and there were many comments. Main materials: the complete pituitary gland of phantom yalong, also known as colorful sauropod, and 10 milliliters of spinal fluid of semi-phantom rabbit, also known as farce man rabbit. Auxiliary materials: I know all these. Audrey first one lung immediately emerged from the bottom of my heart's strong joy. Thank you, Mr. Fool. You are really very knowledgeable. She looked up again, sincerely thanking and praising Alger, the Upside Down. Doesn't know what happened, but he is very disdainful of the words of justice. How can a great man like a god be described by erudition? To some extent, this existence itself is equal to knowledge. Klein accepted Miss Justice's praise frankly, because it was not something that happened to get the Mind Reader formula of psychological alchemy after pulling the sun into the tarot meeting. Based on the particularity of the other party's Silver City, he has been preventing similar problems and constantly looking for corresponding materials to learn. Even if Dast Guderian didn't get the formula in time, he could easily complete the annotation just now. After the previous divination and the comparison just now, he was convinced that the two Mind Readers' formulas were correct. This is prepared, no harm. Klein seems to think slightly. Audrey read the formula of Mind Reader several times again, looked back reluctantly, and skillfully expressed the diary of Roselle the Great. You deserve it. She put down her pen and looked at the Fool in the fog. Besides, how about I give your family another 300,300 pounds? What she said is a little guilty, because 3 pages of Roselle's diary only cost her 20 pounds, while the sheriff formula, which is also located in sequence 8, costs 450 pounds. In other words, starting from simple mathematics, she should pay 430 pounds in addition to the 3 pages of notes. However, Audrey felt that it also had its own lucky factors. The seller didn't know the value of Roselle's diary, which enabled her to buy it at a fairly low price. The Diary of Russell the Great, at least 50 pounds per page. Audrey quietly clenched her fist and silently cheered herself up. 300 pounds. As of today, I have seen so much money in Sir Deville's place. Klein sighs, pretending to be indifferent to money, and nods. A reasonable deal. This is the information of my loved ones. He tried his best to avoid uttering degrading terms such as Bank of Backlander and bearer account from the mouth of fools, and presented them directly on the sheepskin in front of him. Last Wednesday, when checking the Red Chimney House, Klein took the time to go to the Tingen branch of the Bank of Backlander and opened an anonymous account in disguise. This kind of account only needs to remember the account number and give the corresponding ciphertext so that the balance can be withdrawn from all branches of Backlander Bank. If the account holder thinks that this method is not safe enough, he can also attach a signature and fingerprint comparison, which will be more troublesome. In order to keep secret and hide his identity, Klein didn't set it up at that time, leaving only a set of ciphertext. This set of ciphertext is written in ancient Hermes language. A fool who does not belong to this era, a mysterious master above the fog, and a yellow and black king in charge. Of good luck. Because the ancient Hermes language itself can be used for sacrifice and prayer without protection, whoever dares to copy this set of ciphertext is equivalent to reciting my name. In that case, I can immediately receive the corresponding prompt to tell whether it is normal to go to the fog or who wants to steal my wealth. Klein is very satisfied with the idea he came up with. The only disadvantage of this is that the existence of fools will be slightly leaked, but it is acceptable. Audrey pushed Rozelle's diary to Mr. Fool and took the parchment with the information of the other party's relatives, marked with the Bank of Backlander, and the corresponding anonymous account composed of a series of numbers. I don't know whether Mr. Fool's dependents are men or women, and they are in the sequence. Well, they must be very powerful, at least not worse than Hurricane Lieutenant General Qilin Gus. Audrey's thoughts spread uncontrollably, but she soon gathered her attention and began to remember the anonymous account. Don't bother. At this moment, she heard the low and peaceful voice of the fool. After you go home, recite my name silently and write the corresponding information directly. It's just like the red chimney I drew in my divination. The account number is very important and you must never remember it wrong. Klein silently added 2 sentences in his mind. Is that okay? Judging from the language of Mr. Fool, he is confident. Not the Kuei is a great man who is similar to the gods, and this kind of thing can be done. Audrey paused and immediately relieved, thinking that this is logical and reasonable. However, why did I have to memorize the formula so hard just now? Audrey suddenly became confused. This time, Klein held down the page of Rozelle's diary, didn't rush to read it, looked sideways at the sun and asked calmly, "What compensation do you want?" Dyrek seriously thought the next way. I haven't got anything I really want recently. I should be able to digest the Singer potion soon, and the compensation will accumulate there. To prepare for the corresponding Sequence 8 formula or the necessary materials. Sequence 8 is a light-praying man, and I have materials. Even if I can get them, I don't know how to digest them for you. Silver City really holds the acting method. Well, the highest combat power there's only sequence for. Is it limited by materials? Klein nodded thoughtfully and motioned for a deal. Audrey, also keenly aware of the word digestion, consider and ask away. Mr. Sun, have you mastered the acting method? Dyrek looked puzzled at Miss Justice and calmly replied, This is nothing to be surprised about. The general course in Silver City is teaching acting. The general course is teaching acting. Audrey took a look at Upside Down and found that the other party was also looking at herself, and both Huaran fell silent. The origin of the sun is really mysterious. I don't know where Mr. Fool pulled him into the tarot club. The more I think about it, the more awesome it is. Audrey slowed down and looked at the fool with his eyes high in the thick fog, without any surprise. At this time, Alger, the Upside Down, tentatively asked, Mr. Sun, have you made clear the precautions of the acting method? ? Yes. Dyrek nodded without hesitation. Our general education class is very clear. There is only one note for the acting method. Remember, you're just playing. As I expected, we are bypassing the barrier in a clever way, completely disintegrating the residual spiritual influence in the potions, instead of giving into it. Son, you are really a simple teenager, so you are cheated out of important information? Klein smiled and turned his attention to Rozelle's diary in front of him. P.S. Today, we will continue the night shift, seeking recommended tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 159 Gift and Sacrifice, the second more recommended votes monthly ticket. On the tan parchment, slightly twisted and bared his teeth in Chinese wrote, On August 2nd ND. This pool was deeper than I thought. History is really a little girl dressed up. On August 5th, today, I saw the strength of the high-order strong people, which is simply terrible. They have undergone a qualitative change in a certain respect and become like gods. No wonder they have always been described as demigods and demigods. Well, I think it may be more appropriate to call them mythical creatures. On August 6th, it was strange that the 7 churches had such a strange attitude towards potions. In the middle and low sequence stage, they not only gave the main materials to those who were promoted, but also generously shared the formula and demonstrated the process of preparing potions. If there was a corresponding ceremony, they would certainly explain it in detail, while in the high sequence stage, they only provided the finished potions. This is totally illogical. In the middle and low sequence stage, where the main materials are relatively easy to collect and the production process is relatively simple, shouldn't the formula be kept secret and the potions be directly modulated to the target? In the high sequence, because the main materials are difficult to obtain, shouldn't we share the formula and let the members who have the hope of promotion take the initiative to find it? There must be a secret that I don't know yet. On August 9th, what happened in these 2 days made me feel not very good. The Industrial Revolution I started with my own hands, and the steam and mechanical era I personally created will become a hotbed for the birth of evil spirits. What do you mean? A hotbed of evil spirits? Klein frowned slightly, and his forefinger gently tapped the edge of the old long table. Mr. Fool has a problem? Things that can embarrass him must involve a high level. Audrey looked at the leader who was shrouded in thick fog and read some of his current state from the other person's body language. Klein, who was really wondering about high-level problems, thought for a moment and didn't get the answer. He began to consider the possibility of using divination to seek enlightenment. Well, it's impossible to predict the real thing only by 2 simple sentences. I'm not a prophet. Directly predict the hotbed of the birth of an evil god. I feel like I'm dying. Armin may not be as horrible as the eternal sun, but my ability may be even more bizarre. Maybe I'll be found in the end, and there's no way to predict how dangerous it is to try it because once the gods are involved, the danger of divination itself will bring danger. Remember this problem first, observe and think more. On the potions, the arrangement of the church is really weird. I don't know what secrets are hidden behind this. Maybe I can get some hints when I wait for the psychic. No, it should be that necromancer daily becomes the archbishop or senior deacon and enters the core level of the church. What Russell said really makes people yearn for the elegance of the high-order strong. One by one, thoughts flashed, and Klein stopped tapping on the edge of the ancient long table and looked at the ways of justice, upside down, and sun. You can communicate freely. Hanging upside down, Alger immediately said, Mr. Fool, Miss Justice, I've got a new piece of information. Lieutenant General Chi Lin Gus sneaked into Backlandu to complete a difficult task. He may stay there for a long time and create a shocking tragedy. In addition, I also know that this matter involves a very important item, which can help Chi Lin Gus to become a high-order strong one soon. Soon become a high sequence of the strong? Isn't he afraid of losing control? Audrey grasped the key points described by the other party, posed as an audience, and asked in doubt, Chi Lin Gus is the Wind Watcher of Sequence 6, and there is still a Sequence 5 separated from Sequence 4. Alger would have expected to have such a problem, calmly replied. That's why that item is very important. Of course, this is all my speculation. The information I received is this. Chi Lin Gus believes that once he completes the entrustment and gets the item, he will soon be able to say with Nast, the king of the 5 seas, to make the 4 kings and pirates become 5 kings and reduce the number of pirate generals from 7 to 6. Ordinary people may not know it, but as extraordinary people, we should all know that the 4 kings and pirates are either high-sequence powerhouses directly, or with the cooperation of extraordinary ships and magical items, they have high-sequence combat power. If Chi Lin Gus wants to be recognized and equal to them, he must have a close level, so I guess that. I only know that Nast, the king of the 5 seas, is the strongest in Sequence 4, and I don't know the name of his potions. Klein listened quietly and didn't make a statement easily. Derek Berg, the son, though he didn't understand the events described by hanging upside down and didn't know who was who at all, he still listened intently and felt that the world had opened a new door before his eyes to pirates. Where do they live? There is an ocean declared in books. That's very different from the environment around the Silver City. They never seem to worry about the curse or the invasion of dark things. It's really curious. Well, Mr. Fool told me not to ask others secrets at will, which is impolite. Derek thought silently and looked back and forth at hanging people upside down and justice. Your speculation is very reasonable. Of course, it may also be a magical item that can rival the high sequence strong. Justice, Audrey chuckled back. Hanging upside down looked at the fool, with his eyes high in the thick fog, considered it for a moment and looked at Justice and stressed. My description just now has two key points. One is that Qilin Gus will stay in Backlander for a long time, and the other is that it involves a very important and possibly magical item. So, Mr. Fool, don't you feel excited? You have plenty of time for your family to go to Backlander. Alger silently added in his heart, but he didn't dare to say so directly, so he could only put it mildly. You don't have to stress repeatedly, Mr. Upside Down. I understand what you want to say, but my strength doesn't support my involvement in this matter, and I can't leave Tingen without authorization. Klein leaned back and thought helplessly, not to mention the relatives. I can find two more powerful extraordinary people to help. One is Daly, who has been promoted to Sequence 6, but I can't explain everything to her. At most, I received a tip that Qilin Gus, a hurricane lieutenant, sneaked into Backlander and lived in a certain street, planning to do something. In that case, Daly is likely to directly mobilize the power of the Night Watchman and make things very chaotic and troublesome. In the end, if you still can't find help, well, you can try. The other is Mr. Askey, but I can't reveal the identity of a fool to him. If you want to ask him to blend in with Qilin Gus, there's a lack of sufficient and justified reasons. One idea flashed, Klein gently said. I see. See if fools still didn't say, still don't pay attention to Qilin Gus. Upside down, Alger Dark with a sigh. Convergence of loss. Began to communicate with Miss Justice this week's survey results. In short, we have initially locked in the general scope of activities of Qilin Gus, and we are about to start a further search. Audrey first briefly explained the specific situation, and then said with a mentality that I was doing something important and serious. We need more information, focusing on the hobbies and habits of Qilin Gus. Hanging upside down, Alger recalled and said, he likes eating fish very much, especially the fish in the ocean, sliced raw. He loves to drink spirits and looks down on champagne and red wine. Once ashore, he will always find a woman to vent, and his strong body makes a single woman unable to satisfy him. He is used to using cold weapons and rejecting hot weapons. It is difficult for him to stay out of water for a long time. I mean, he has to swim or dive every few days. Audrey remembered it one by one, and outlined and enriched the character named Qilin Gus in her mind. I hope to succeed and cooperate happily. After listening quietly, she smiled and said, Happy cooperation. Alger can only force himself to believe in Miss Justice, who is very energetic in Backlander. During their communication, Klein seems to be listening carefully, but in fact, his thoughts diverged from the previous question. That is, if the son wants to get the materials, how to pay the other party, having been able to barely pass the occult. He habitually went to the field of ritual magic to find a way to solve the problem, which belongs to the path dependence accumulated in the previous success. I read the internal information of the Night Watchman before, and I have seen the records of the sacred objects given to believers by the goddess. Well, there are also descriptions of the arrival of objects in many sacrificial ceremonies involving Baal and demons. Does this mean that I can give items to the other party in response to prayers, so as to complete the payment of materials? In the previous attempts, I can only respond to ideas containing images and sounds for the time being, but this does not mean that I can only do this forever. When I am promoted to Sequence 8 and stabilized, there may be new changes. In addition, there is a key point, whether I can bring real materials or items into the fog.
Air.
Yes. Those sacrificial ceremonies involving evil gods and demons often include the sacrifice link. Can I consider sacrificing things to myself? In this way, maybe you can really bring realistic materials and items into the fog. If the attempt is successful, I can get the goods and materials directly from Justice, Sun, and Upside Down, and then give them to myself. Well, sacrifice belongs to a more advanced ceremony, and I haven't been exposed to it for the time being. The most important thing at present is to improve yourself as soon as possible. Klein withdrew his thoughts and continued to listen to the three members' communication with profound attitude, listening to their discussions from Chi Lin Gus to the characteristics of some monsters. After almost, he smiles to say, "Let's call it a day. Follow your wishes." Sun, Direk, and Justice, and Upside Down got up and said at the same time. After cutting off contact with the three members, Klein also quickly fell into the fog and left the mysterious space back in the bedroom. He removed the spiritual wall, pulled open the curtain of the protruding belly window, and let the outside sunshine in. There are two important things this week. One is to be examined and promoted to Sequence 8, and the other is to make the Yang Yen charm, whose power will even exceed Sequence 7 and Sequence 6. Klein looked at the street outside and thought with anticipation, Tomorrow, you should be able to receive Paranormal's report made by Mr. Ask. P.S. Send it on the second watch and ask for a monthly ticket for recommended votes. Genius remembers the address of this website for 1 second. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 160 sees the opportunity, a third more for recommended votes monthly ticket. On Tuesday morning, Klein, who had finished his occult course, didn't find a quiet place to read the internal materials such as comparison of ancient and modern names and case collection of night watchers as before, but stayed in the recreation room and played cards with Leonard, Cohen Lee, and Luo Yao. I just asked Mr. Ask to create an opportunity to bring out the seal 3-0782. Whether I can seize this opportunity depends on my own improvisation. Klein's mind was completely absent from the poker table, so that he repeatedly missed, and he lost 5 souls in an hour. He was very distressed by the loss. He planned to concentrate first and save some losses. Yesterday afternoon, after buying all kinds of materials of Yang Yen mantra, his private money was reduced to less than £1 again, and he had to pay 2 soul for a taxi every day to check the houses with dark red chimneys. While waiting for Cohen Lee to shuffle the cards, he picked up the copper penny in front of him, bored, and made a rotation. Suddenly, he saw Luo Yao staring at himself, staring very seriously. What's the matter? Klein was stunned, and then he saw the crumbling copper penny. This is in the alert. I cheated with divination? There's no need to be so serious about playing cards between teammates. He suddenly understood and pressed down the penny with a dry smile. Just then, Dunsmith knocked at the door and looked around. There's something going on in the town of Morse, Leonard. Please deal with it. Morsetown? Klein's spirit aflap, so asked curiously. Captain, what's the matter? Dun gray eyes swept away, freely explained. In recent days, there have been several suspected haunted incidents. First, when someone passed by the cemetery, he heard crying and saw vague shadows flash by. Then, a widow woke up in the middle of the night on her way to the bathroom and almost fainted. In addition, an old man who lived alone always heard heavy footsteps echoing in the house, but as long as he lit candles or gas lamps, everything was quiet again. This town did no harm, closer to a prank. It should have been made by Mr. Askey. Klein said with a rehearsed expression and tone, Captain, there have been several suspected haunted events suddenly, and there may be some secrets hidden behind them. In this respect, divination can give some enlightenment, and I think I can help Leonard. Hearing the sentence, Leonard's green eyes immediately stared at Klein, as if trying to find clues and traces from each other's faces. Dunn first nodded, then hesitated as Klein saw the captain's reaction and immediately added, In the end, some things may need ritual magic to be completely purified. That makes sense. Dunn thought for a moment. Then you go to Morsetown with Leonard. Before anyone could speak, he added, Well, you shouldn't be able to catch up with the fighting practice this afternoon. I'll find someone to inform Gawain. Phew, the first step is completed. Klein inwardly spat out a sigh and quickly picked up cellar and pennies in front of him. Get a half. His action suddenly froze. Side had looked done, solemnly said, Captain, I think we have to prevent the worst. If there is a powerful soul behind the haunted event, it will be very dangerous if Leonard and I are alone, and it will take 3 hours from downtown Tingen to Morsetown. Even if we send a telegram for help in time, we have to persist for a long time. So, Dunn interrupted his description. I hope to get the help of another teammate. Klein pretended to be thinking. Moreover, according to the regulations, 3 or more night watchmen can apply for the use of a 3-level seal. Well, 3-0782 is the most suitable solution to this problem. I heard that. Next to Leonard smiled a track. This is really your style. Be careful, and never take risks. You seem to be saying that I'm a coward. I've looked straight at the eternal sun. Klein pretended not to hear Leonard's words and sincerely looked at Dunn. Smith said, Captain, what's your opinion? It is really necessary to prevent accidents. There have been too many coincidences recently. Dunn nodded as if thinking, glanced at the other 2 players and said, Cohenly, you go to Morristown with Leonard and Klein. Well, you quickly draw up an application. After I sign it, I will take out the seal 3-0782 from behind the Cheney's gate. Okay. Cohenly, who is not tall, put down the cards in his hand. Okay. Klein cheered with a clenched fist in his heart, but on the surface he looked nervous and cautious. At this moment, Sigathong is monitoring Hood Eugen and Fry's rotation at the Cheney's gate in the madhouse. Out of the recreation room, Klein put on a black tuxedo, took a hat and cane, and waited for Cohenly at the stairway leading to the underground with Leonard. No one around, quiet and cold. Leonard's abrupt side had looked Klein way. I think you'd better give up unrealistic fantasies. Ah, what? Klein responded blankly. Leonard stepped forward and stood on the edge of the ladder, overlooking the deep below. Even in the mission, you can't find my secret and understand my special place. Classmate, don't be so narcissistic, okay? So, you think I volunteered to take part in this task to spy on you? I didn't think of this at all. Klein first suddenly, and then hey. How can you be sure that my uniqueness can't help me discover your secret? Leonard's expression was dignified, but he immediately Jean-Yen laughed. Are you? Then, I am waiting for your discovery. When I collect more information and articles, I will go to the fog and help you with the divination. You're welcome. Klein responded to each other with condescension, but not long after, the short and lean Cohenly appeared on the winding steps with the mutated sun emblem. Feeling the unique warmth and purity, Klein quietly breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that he had finally completed the initial and most difficult step in the plan to steal the blood power of the eternal sun. Then, a line of 3 people left the Blackthorn Security Company, came to Zotland Street, and went to the carriage belonging to the Night Watchman team. The effect of purification will not affect the horses, will it? Cohenly suddenly asked uneasily. I don't want a horse-drawn cart that only praises the sun. He has been a night watchman only longer than Klein, and his experience is far from rich. No, the seal 3-0782 only purifies creatures with high intelligence. Klein replied in a low voice, If it weren't for this, I wouldn't be bitten by mosquitoes. He added in his mind, I see. Haha, I didn't read the information carefully enough. Cohenly pressed his black top hat and suddenly laughed. Because Klein has not mastered the skill of driving a carriage, he sat in the carriage for the next 3 hours, stroking the seal 3-0782 in his palm and watching Leonard and Cohenly take turns driving. At lunchtime, they finally arrived in the town of Morse. It's beautiful. Cohenly got off the carriage and looked at the endless golden wheat fields around the town and sincerely praised the sentence. The date symbolizing Volcano Constellation is coming to an end, and Harvest Constellation is about to dominate everyone's life. Leonard stood in the driver's position, looked around, and opened his mouth as if he wanted to write a sonnet for the occasion. But in the end, he only suppressed one sentence. It's beautiful. Klein laughed, put on his hat, grabbed his cane, and got out of the carriage. At this time, a middle-aged man in a black priest's uniform came along and drew a crimson moon on his chest. Praise the goddess. Are you friends sent by the Church of St. Selena to help us? Yes, Reverend Shell. May the goddess bless you. Leonard jumped out of the carriage and smiled and replied, We are here to deal with the recent haunted incidents. Suspected. Gray-haired and blue-eyed, Al saw many townspeople approaching, and he was busy emphasizing the sentence. Morristown is not big. No matter which direction you go, you can enter the plane in 10 minutes at most. It's hard for people who live here not to know each other. What happened before has spread by stealth. Therefore, many townspeople, who are eagerly waiting for the Church of the Goddess of Night to send someone to solve the problem, gathered around with curiosity and concern when they saw the priest welcoming 3 strangers. Some stood on tiptoe, while others tried their best to give ear. Leonard chuckled a track. "Reverend, please rest assured that we are professionals. You see, we have brought holy water, silver dagger, dark emblem, and garlic." As he spoke, he magically pulled out the described items from his pocket on the inside of his clothes. "Garlic? Are you trying to smoke a ghost to death with a pungent smell?" Klein looked at Leonard's performance with anger and laughter. Searle, on the other hand, looked confused and even began to wonder if St. Selena's church had brought in a group of liars. The villagers who were watching showed a happy smile in unison, and it seemed that they were finally rescued. Leonard Neral, priest, explained in a low voice in his ear. "They believe these before each other during the he added. Let's go to the church to solve lunch first, and then deal with those events." Yes, lunch is very important. After dealing with those paranormal, it is the time to rotate the guard seal 3-0782, which is the opportunity for me to make the sun charm. I hope everything goes well. Of course, the sun charm has to be made in the daytime to achieve the best effect. Klein is thinking with anticipation.